what the Koshish team sent to me. The topic for what I have to cover: India's energy future in a world of change. Vision 2047: Clean, Green, and Energy Independent India. So I think the topic is self-explanatory. Everybody knows that the time has come for the whole world to move towards a cleaner and a greener world, not for us, but for our children and grandchildren. Now let's talk about the topic here, and this will go a little fast here. Okay. So if you really look at the topic, the key element out of the topic that I have picked up and which I think I can speak on, clean and green, there are a lot of things to speak about. So Swachh India and there's so much of other initiatives are there. Green, we understand what green means. But the energy part of it is what I think I'll talk about. Where do we stand today as a country? Where does the globe stand there and what are we doing about it and what we should be doing about it? Basically, everything boils down to sustainability. And let's look at what is sustainability. Sustainability basically means survival. If you look at the underlying meaning of sustainability. If you can't sustain, and if you're not sustainable, essentially it means you're going to disappear, you're going to die. That's what it is. And if you don't want to do it, I don't think any of us as a person or as a community or as a nation or as the world and the humankind wants to die. So we must change. And what should we change in order to survive? That's a couple of minutes that I'll take here on. Everybody knows about global warming. We've been hearing this for many years and decades now, almost. So there's nothing new in understanding global warming. But believe me, maybe about 10 years from today, it was kind of a forecast. It was a kind of, we are going to be warmer and we will have problems. But today, I think we are seeing these problems today. The 10 years that I know about, we are actually seeing things around us. The monsoons are now stretching all the way into October, which never happened. They don't start in time. The rains are not as uniform it is. The crop patterns are really getting destroyed because of it. Vegetable prices are going more than 100 rupees a kg just because the rains have come at the wrong time. I think since you're studying economics, you understand what I'm talking about. Every second day we keep hearing there is a flood there and there is a drought there, or there are wildfires here and there. And why all this is happening? Purely because of global warming. So is there anybody who doesn't know anything about global warming or wants to know more? Greenhouse gases and how do they happen? Then I can go into more details of it. All of you know generally what I'm talking about? Fine. Look at some numbers. This is the curve which shows the temperature growth from 1850 up to 2025. The point to note is the scale. So this black line that you show there is the average global temperature, which is the target temperature, which was the pre-industrial era, which is approximately about 14 degrees centigrade. Today, the global temperature is already reaching 1 degree more than that. And it is said that if we don't do anything about it, by 2100, by the end of the century, we would be almost 2.5 to 3 degrees more than what we are. And it's all because of greenhouse gases. Why greenhouse gases are good for us? Because if greenhouse gases were not there, it will be a permafrost on the earth. Because the earth's atmosphere will not be able to hold the heat that is required to keep us alive and the nature that what we see around it. But too much of it basically will mean the temperatures will not go up. There are 193 nations who have signed the pact during the COP26 and all that, and they've all committed that they'll do something about it. The latest UN report, and this is what I picked up yesterday, it says that only 26 out of 193 countries have really either done something about it or have declared that they want to do something about it. And the rest of them are still really not acted on it. So we can understand the direction in which we are moving today. And if we continue to do this, like I told you, almost 2.1 to 2.9 degrees Celsius compared to that. But what is this 1 degree, 2 degree? Let's understand what exactly it means in real terms. This is what I call a 1 degree effect. This photo that I'm showing you is part of my blog that I wrote in 2015. There is a blog on Facebook, Green 24/7. I wrote this blog and I picked it up when I was preparing for this because it was still relevant today. Just 1 degree difference in our global temperature increase means extra trillions of tons of water will goes into the atmosphere. And this is not what the nature has planned out to be. It basically leads to very heavy precipitations. So you have heavy rains, but those are not the rains that we are designed or we should actually be having. They are more like cloudbursts. So you have gaps and then you have suddenly a rush of rains. You've seen Bombay inundating, you've seen Calcutta inundating, you've seen Delhi inundating. So basically the systems are not designed to have that amount of water to come in that short time. But what happens to that water? It all gets wasted away. Your dams get full, they have to open the gates and they have to release the water because otherwise the dams would burst. It's a safety reason. Now what happens when they release the water? You will have floods in the villages which are down in there. But if the water has just come in very short time and then there is no rain or no water for a long period of time, ultimately the total capacity of the dam, that's an annual capacity, is not met. And then you find that towards the end of the summers, you start having water cuts because there was no rain after that. And the rain that came has got all washed away. It's only created another problem. So, but overall, there is less rain, there's less snow. And if you have less snow, how do your rivers will run in summer? Imagine. Your rivers will only have water if there's snow melting. We know it, and we have done it in our school. So, there's less water. As there's less water, there is a reduced moisture in the soil. Reduced moisture, soil, drought. And so you have basically a cycle of droughts and floods. Are we not seeing this around us every day? This is what's happening. And this is when we're talking of a 1 degree. Imagine if it was 2 degrees, where would we be? Can you relate to this? Just this summer, Europe has gone through a drought and all the major rivers in Europe have dried up. This is how Danube looks like. This is how Rhine looks like. This is how the longest river of France, Loire, looks like. I think we all understand this. I don't have to explain this. Now let's look at the greenhouse emissions by sectors the world over. This is the global number. It's self-explanatory, but electricity and heat production contributes to around 25%. Agricultural, forestry is 24%, transportation 14%, industry 21%, and other energy is around 10%, and you have buildings which is 6%. This is the how the greenhouse emissions by sector. So that means we need to address every sector which is shown on this in some way or the other, or something to really change. And we will talk later what changes can be happening and what's actually happening. This is the carbon dioxide per capita emission in the world. Just take a minute here. You can see this thing? Okay. So if you look at it, the major contributors to greenhouse gases, the two countries are USA and China. The area of the box that you see there is the total greenhouse emission and the height is the per capita one. India, we are down there just because our population is too high. And also we very frankly don't really have that amount of emissions because our industry or we still haven't reached the same level of development as what probably US or China is there. Statistics shows that in case everybody on this world starts consuming at the same level of US, one earth is not sufficient. We'll probably need 3 to 5 earths to sustain the level of consumption that what it is. And US just has 5% of world's population and consumes 30%. So it basically indicates that while all of us are doing what we have to do, the bigger countries who are really the bigger culprit, China and US, really have to put their act together. Not saying that India doesn't have to, we also have to do it. And this is where there is a serious issue there. You would have heard in COP26, before that, the previous COP, the US had withdrawn from the whole greenhouse discussions itself. And it is only when the president changed that they participated in it. And China is China, though they have declared something, but what they really do, we really don't know. If you look at how India, so now let's come to the India's energy mix. Whatever energy we are consuming in India, this is how we are producing those energy. And if you see, bulk of it is all non-fossil fuel. The renewable energy part of it and the hydro part is just approximately 9%. Clear indication that there's a huge scope for something to be done here. And that's why probably I'm standing in front of you, being part of the renewable energy industry, to talk about what's happening, what government is doing about it, and what's possible to be done there. Now, if you look at only the electricity production part of it, so that was the total energy which for heating and transportation and everything. If you look at the electricity part of it, today India produces almost 58% of its capacity is installed capacity is by coal, and about 40% is the renewable part of it, which is quite a good number. We were just about 10% something, I think, a couple of years down, and we have reached 40%. But out of this 40%, if you look at it, almost 30% of this 40% is big hydro, the big dams that what we have. And it's good that India continues to invest in that, and we are looking at dams getting constructed. But other than that, the wind, solar is what contributes to the rest of it. If you look at the coal part of the non-fossil part of it, bulk of it is coal here. And out of the wind, solar, if you look at it, we have almost, the majority is now solar, which is around 61 gigawatts. Solar is about. When I started my journey in renewable about in 2010, believe me, we didn't hear about solar. 2010, 20, 12 साल हुए? 12 साल पहले जब मैंने start किया था, I had not heard of a single company of solar. And solar was probably more like a technology demonstrator or maybe experimental stuff somewhere here and there. And we were only talking wind today. And look at where we have reached there in the 12 years today. And this is a number, and every year we are adding dozens of gigawatt now. That's where we are moving at the space at which moving there. And there were only like 3 companies I remember. Suzlon was there, Enercon was there, and Vestas. Vestas was in a different name there. And today you can publish a full magazine with the name of companies which are working in the renewable space. Full magazine. Recently I've attended 2 events and I was amazed at the number of people involved, the kind of money that is floating around, the kind of stakeholders that are involved in renewable. It tells you that we are probably in the right direction. You heard about the term called carbon neutrality? Okay. So carbon neutrality is actually, when we talk about greenhouse gases, we are saying basically carbon based. It's also nitrogen oxide and methane and others, but basically carbon. And carbon neutrality means is how much or whatever you produce carbon, if you're able to offset it or reduce it and both balances each other, it's called carbon neutrality. It's simple as that. And there are 2 ways to do it. One is to either offset it, and second way to do it is replace it. The replacement is very simple. I have a diesel generator at home and I don't want to use a diesel generator. I want to move towards greenhouse. I put solar panels on my home and get energy from the grid. So that is replacement. I'm replacing it altogether. And offsetting is I have an industry where I have a limitation that I really cannot replace it 100%. I still have to, I will have some carbon emissions. Now what do I do? So it gives you an option, invest in green technologies, put wind farms, solar farms, wind farms at other places, or buy carbon credits. So there are companies who will invest in these and they will generate carbon credits. Every ton of carbon dioxide is 1 credit. And there's a marketplace in which you can trade. So I have created an X amount of carbon. I go and buy X amount of carbon credits. So basically it's offsetting it. It provides the investment into other people doing it. But as an overall community, we all benefit from it. So these are the 2 ways of doing it. I was just morning when I was working, I was looking at this as to what is the world. Like I told you, only 26 out of those nations have done something. This simple graphic shows us every country is kind of now announced as to when it's going to become net zero. So it tells which country has kind of announced when it's going to become net zero. And India was not there on this chart because India has done very recently. It's just, I think, month and a half back that in the new act, the in the parliament, they have announced that India will now become carbon neutral by 2070. That's the target. So we are in the target point, we are right at the end of this place. And the other countries, most of the countries have taken 2050 as the target. But let me tell you, though India as a whole has taken a target of 2070, most of the corporates, because now in CleanMax we are working with companies to help them become carbon neutral. And we ourselves are also working towards becoming our own carbon neutrality. All companies are mostly taking target of 2030, 2040, some of 2050. You would have heard it like Tata's and others, they're all announced by 2050, most of them will become carbon neutral. So the corporate sector has really jumped into the bandwagon. And not only because of probably the good feel factor, you understood that it is a necessity. And more often than not, it is the money, the investments that what people are now looking at is now all have a caveat of ESG and caveat of carbon neutral. So money will only get flow where companies demonstrate that they want to become carbon neutral. So how do we, basically 3 steps process, okay? One is obviously get onto the demand side. Reduce your demand on carbon. You can reduce it by switching over to more greener options or avoiding or reducing the consumption. Why drive a car like they say if you can cycle? When you don't, and if only one person going, why go in a car? You can go on a 2-wheeler. Why not share public transport? I think we have heard about all these things, and I think I will not want to bore all of you with these kind of things. So that is obviously the step 1, and then the step 2 is to scale up the green energy provisions, and the third is move over to 100% clean energy. And with the technologies that what we have today, not that there is a huge amount of research which is required, even what we have today, we are on the right direction. You have heard about green hydrogen? Everybody heard about green hydrogen? And you see that it's a clear one-to-one replacement to fossil fuel in so many places. So all these things are now possible. And there are technologies now which are working towards making coal more greener, because the world still can't do without coal, very frankly. So there are technologies which are now moving towards how do you make coal more green? How do you capture the carbon that's coming out of it? And how do you then reuse that carbon? How do you store that carbon? How do you put it in oceans? There are a lot of work which is happening around it. And I think if the whole world puts their mind together, we move in the right direction. The only thing that's going to block us is the countries which need to invest in this may not have the money to invest in the R&D and the technology. And the countries which have the money and invested in the technology for commercial reasons might not share it very freely with other countries. You know this issue which is there, and I think this is an issue we need to address. If you go away sector by sector, every sector has different things that they can work on. You look at transportation sector, or you look at the logistics supply chain sector. You look at the generation, we know what we're already talking about it. Look at the social part of sustainability part of it, or look at the building part of it. You heard about LEEDs, certification of building, GRA, certification of building. What are these certifications? These are the certifications basically encourage the buildings to go green, to use technologies which uses less energy. If you look at where do we stand today in India in solar and wind, if we come specific to that, we had a target of 100 gigawatt by 2022, and we are in 2022 today. It's unlikely that we might achieve the old target. This number is slightly old. By the end of this year, we probably will be somewhere in the range of about 70 is what is the expectation. And in wind, maybe another about couple of gigawatts will get added. So we are surely short of our target, but we are in the right direction. Recently, you would have heard in media that the Prime Minister had announced that we'll have a 500 gigawatt target by 2030. But then when finally the rules of the act came out in the parliament, they dropped the 500 gigawatt. But what they have accepted is we will become net zero by 2070, and 50% of our generation capacity will be from non-fuel by 2030. So instead of saying that we'll reach 500, they have kind of taken that as a target. So let's understand what are the initiatives which are already in place today. Because it's important to understand what are we doing, both as a country, as a government, as a community. So these are the policies we have announced. So with the National Solar Wind Hybrid Policy, I don't want to go into the details of these policies. The basic idea is that all part of the ecosystem, the whole value chain, is getting addressed in some form or the other. Though it's not fully there, neither it is fully working the way it was expected to work, but at least the steps are being taken there. You heard about green hydrogen policy, the offshore wind policy, round the clock, because renewable, has a problem. Solar will work only in daytime and wind will only work when the wind is there. So how do you have a generator in your home which you don't know whether it will work when you want it to work? Why will you invest in a generator like this? You need round the clock power. So there are policies which are now coming into place, and there are mechanisms like through battery storage or pumped water storage or clubbing renewable sources with non-renewable sources and ensuring round the clock power is there. So those things are already now in place. And then you heard about the green energy open access rules. And do you know what is open access? I'll take half a minute there then. How many of you don't? I never heard about open access. Okay. So I'll take half a minute here. See, we need to understand that energy, the transmission of energy is all done by the state. Either it is the central government, which is the PGCIL, Power Grid Corporation, or you have the state grids. Now you are producing energy in a particular place and you are not using it there. You could have a wind farm on top of a hilltop, but your factory is not there. You need power somewhere else, a different part of the state or maybe in a different state. How do you take power from point A to point B? You will have to depend on the grid infrastructure. And that's called open access. Means that grid infrastructure is open to be accessed by people who want to access it. Obviously, there are certain charges to be paid. It's just like the toll tax, like what we give it. But it is free. The Energy Act allows people to apply for open access, take long-term open access, short-term, medium-term, whatever they want, pay those charges and transmit power. So this is called open access. And there's always been issues around it on policy matter and implementation of it. The government is trying to make it easier for people to do it. And this is where corporates are now getting benefited from it. Like Amazon in India wants to become 100% green sourcing by X time. How will he do it? He doesn't have any wind farm in his this thing. Then you have the corridors. After all, you have to transmit power. We discuss open access and unit transmission corridors. People need to invest in that. And then you have the Electricity Act, which is made to open access easier. So this is not all the areas that what I have listed out. We need to work more on. Is policy on storage. This is important. Like we said, the renewable is not all the time. So you need storage. So there is a policy which is required to be made. Grids have to become smarter. Today, the same line can carry more power and carry it both ways if you make the grid smarter. The discoms, we all need, I think you would have probably read about all this, the discoms, the problem that they have with the subsidies that the government politicians announce on, and they don't have money to pay. Finally, they are the people who are taking power and giving it to somebody. If you don't make their health good, how the renewable companies which are investing would get the rates? Because they sign PPAs, but they don't get the money. That's a problem there. Issues between center and state. Power in India, unfortunately, is a concurrent topic. Both center and state can decide, and there is always a conflict between what people have there. EV charging, I think we know a lot of EV is coming, but the issue is charging infrastructure for it. We need to really work on it. The green hydrogen announced good, but it will only get, you'll see the fruit of it if both the demand side and the supply side and the whole market develops around green hydrogen. Carbon capture we discussed in the previous thing. Enhanced domestic manufacturing, government is really taking a lot of steps there on seeing how renewable energy can be produced more in India. And policies across ministries. You have different ministries looking at it, power, Ministry of New Renewable, Petroleum, and Finance. One ministry announces something and another ministry does something different, and it's all contradiction to each other. It doesn't work. We want to go green, but then the government will put a custom duty of 40% on solar panels, which make the project totally unviable. Why? Because the government wants domestic productions to be encouraged, but the companies which are producing in India are all selling in US. So how the whole thing doesn't fit in together is something a big challenge that what we have in India. I think we really need to sort that out. Distributed RE, I think we understand distributed RE means you produce where you need it and This is the best way to do it. Carbon pricing and tax. Today we don't have that policy in India. Everybody needs to put a number to what carbon is producing, and it should be part of his financial balance sheet. Some countries have started putting it, and that is actually showing the hidden cost now on the paper. And a decision to invest is now going to be taken better as to which technology to go in. Then common green taxonomy. Today different projects have different ways to assess the project from a financial viability point of view. There's no standardization. We need to move them, and the whole value chain need to be aligned for that. That is what I wanted to talk to you about, the sustainability part of it. Any questions? Yeah.
Sir, I wanted to ask that carbon neutrality is one thing. We also now start talking about eliminating carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, just to increase the speed towards Earth not becoming that warmer.
Good. Anybody wants to add to the question? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So I go back to the slide. And like I said, there are two ways of reducing your carbon footprint or moving towards carbon neutrality. So when we talk about carbon neutrality, and it's a very good question you have asked, and this is something we were discussing in our office also yesterday. Carbon neutrality basically says that wherever we are today, we remain there. Only thing we offset it. Okay? And that's not the way to go forward. Obviously, we want to go towards zero carbon. So the carbon neutrality is a step one, I can say. And ultimately, if you remember the 3 steps that I was talking about, we want to move towards 100% green. And that's the only way to move about it. Just to go, otherwise you're going to remain at 1 degree plus, that's what we're talking about. And that will happen over a period of time when enough technologies of the scale gets created, when we totally eliminate the carbon-based fossil fuels. Like if you go to a green hydrogen, if your cars run by green hydrogen, your flight, your trains, your power stations run by green hydrogen, you will not be producing this thing. And those are all negative carbon, what we are talking about. Similarly, if you have heard about that, one of the major users of hydrogen and carbon producer and the carbon creators are the steel industries and cement industries, and those are the industries where again people are talking about using green hydrogen and replacing them. And as the technology develops, when we look at CSS, that is the carbon sequestration and storage, when you start capturing the carbon, then you don't release it into the atmosphere. And this carbon is then recycled into industry back, or they are stored into the atmosphere, not atmosphere, into the oceans, where they get recycled into future this thing. So we will ultimately reach there. It's a matter of time. But today's target is, the target that the globe has taken is, by 2050, we need to stop the greenhouse warming at 1.5 degrees. That is the, I will say, the step one target today. And that itself is a long way away if you see there. So by 2050, if we are able to stop at 1.5 degrees, I think we've done a great job. And once we reach there, obviously then it's a question of time that those things multiply and become a habit, and they become the norms of life, and we'll obviously then start looking at a negative moment. I hope I've answered the question.
Right.
The companies, we talked about, there's so many companies, the whole ecosystem is full of companies who are working in this area. Like I said, CleanMax, there's so many companies that I have talked about, and there are companies all over the world. The only challenge is how they collaborate with each other. That's important. Instead of competing with each other. I think it's a matter of time that will also happen, I would say. Thank you. Yeah.
And on the other hand, there are talking about currency as the future. But crypto uses so much energy that right now happens as a whole more energy than an entire country. How do we balance this? On one hand, we are already struggling with that goal, carbon neutrality. On the other hand, we're also trying to use energy.
Thanks for that question, and I recollect a discussion we were having with my colleagues maybe a month and a half back on this point. And so I think we need to understand how the human nature. Okay. The the resources will move where the money is. And that's the reason why probably the resources are moving towards the crypto, that part of it. But who's stopping to use green energy to run those supercomputers and those servers, which are actually the server farms which are there? Nobody's stopping them to use green energy. And as the fossil fuel energy becomes less available and becomes costlier, they will have. And today already, if you look at it, the rates at which the green energy is getting sold, it is almost, it's at par with the energy that you're getting from others. The issue is only that it's not available 24/7. And as like I told you, the different technologies that are coming there, we are going to move towards that direction. And when we are producing green energy at one end, why not use that energy to mine crypto and earn money out of that and also earn carbon credits? So if we are thinking about it, I am sure there are a lot of people who are thinking about it. So we will move in that direction, and I see. But I cannot say that just because it's so much power, tomorrow crypto will not be there. It's not going to happen. That's going to be the future. It's going to remain. I hope I've been able to answer. Yeah.
So you talked about green hydrogen, that it can be used in cars and bikes.
Yes.
But is it really possible? Because green hydrogen is something that is really inflammable, and we need cryogenic containers for that. So is it really possible to use green hydrogen as a day-to-day commercial source of energy?
Okay. Firstly, let's understand what is green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is also hydrogen. It's chemically no different from brown hydrogen, blue hydrogen, grey hydrogen. It's hydrogen, and you're absolutely right. It is combustible. If you remember in Second World War, Zeppelins and all this, they were using helium. Remember, and they were also, and you had all those fire accidents that happened there. So yes, it's a fact that hydrogen is dangerous, but so is your CNG, and so is your pump, the natural gas that you use in your kitchen. Isn't that combustible? Will it not blast in case it catches fire? So all those things will happen. It's a question of using the right medium and the technology to do it. Now, hydrogen, if you understand how hydrogen works, how the hydrogen drives cars, basically the technology, what we are talking about here is not an internal combustion engine. So it's not that the hydrogen will be put as part of your carburetor or your fuel injection system and it will be mixed with air and then used there. It will basically be using something called fuel cells. If you heard about fuel cells are platinum based. There are platinum which are catalyst, and the hydrogen which is put into the cell combines with oxygen, converts to water, and in the reaction that's formed, it basically generates electricity. It's the reverse of electrolysis. What does electrolysis do? You pass electric current into water, hydrogen and oxygen get separated out. In fuel cell, you put hydrogen and oxygen, they combine and produce electricity. It's simple battery like the earlier lead acid batteries also. How the sulfuric acid then acts as the electrolyte. So that's not going to happen there. And there are other ways to, like if you have heard about hydrogen, you also heard about ammonia. So ammonia is one of the mediums in which hydrogen can be transported and then be used. So there are ways which are happening there, and that is what I think is going to be working.
Just a follow-up question. Like green hydrogen is basically prepared from a renewable source of energy.
Yes.
Let's say by electrolysis. So that is not something that is like cost effective. It won't be as cheaper as the fuel that we are using right now. So what can be like?
Okay. You know, when these solar power plants were first established, the cost of the solar power plant were in the tunes of about 10 crores per megawatt. And the PPAs which were signed were in the range of 15 rupees or 16 rupees per unit. You know what's the approximate price today for a solar power plant per megawatt? Anybody? And what is the PPA rates? I think forget about the capex, but I'm saying the PPA rate you would have been hearing about. They are all in the range of 2 rupees now per unit. We've got an 8-time reduction in the last 10 years, and the capex has now fallen to approximately about 3 crores from what it was. So the Moore's law, you know, that every year what is applied to computing is also going to get applied here. It's a question of economies of scale, And it's a question of reaching that place where the demand and supply match each other and the prices fall. So this is going to happen. Today it is expensive because enough has not got invested in that particular thing. I'm sure there's a matter of time that the hydrogen fuel on a calorific basic value will be almost same as what the petroleum gives you. I hope we reach that stage. And even if we don't, there's a price to pay for everything. You know, there are no free lunches. There would be a stage when today already, you know, diesel and petrol are more than 100 rupees. It's there. And there was a time when we used to reach at 80 rupees and 90 rupees, people used to come out on the street. Has anybody heard anybody coming on the street when it was more than 100 rupees? No. People have absorbed it, people understood it. No, I think that's the new way of life now. So that's what's going to happen. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
My question is that switching to renewable energy and the sustainable energy incurs a lot of cost. So when lot of economies in the world are facing problem in meeting the basic demands or the basic things for their population, so how viable it is for them to switch to the sustainable energy? Like they might be part of this Paris Climate Act and they might be targeting 2050 to switch to sustainable energy. But are we on the track to become a green energy, or like, is it feasible to meet those goals?
Thank you. So firstly, let's understand when we talk about green energy, clean energy, we are not only talking about solar and wind production, that's what we're talking about. And today, at the scales at which we are producing them today, we are already cheaper than or equal to coal production. Actually, much cheaper than coal. Give an example. In Tamil Nadu, today it has one of the highest penetration of green energy. In addition to it, almost 30% of the total energy being produced in Tamil Nadu is out of capex. Capex project. Capex project means I have an industry, I need energy, I put my own power plant. And those power plants are either based on gas or they're based on coal. It's something I have a cement factory. So grid can't give me enough power. I will put my own coal-based thermal power plant and I'll use that energy. I have a refinery. So people do that. You know what is the average rate of a capex self-generated power today? More than 10 rupees. Means if I have to run my own power plant and get power from my factory, I get it at 10 rupees to run that plant and get the power. And at what rate do I sell power to an industry today? 4 rupees, 3 rupees. This is what he gets it from. Why will he not go green and why will he not shut down his capex plant? I think any businessman who has common sense will do that. This is what's actually happening in the world outside. People are moving away from fossil fuel based fuel and moving on to green because firstly it's a good thing to do, but it makes economic sense. Nothing is done in this world on long term if it is only on a feel good factor. It will only survive if it makes economic sense. And today it makes economic sense to go green. And then secondly, when I was talking about that this is not the only two things, think about chula. A simple example I'm giving you. Today, the average efficiency of a chula that a woman in the village uses, the normal chula that she uses, the efficiency is only 25 to 30%. Giving her a more efficient chula increases the efficiency from 30% to 75%. It allows more the whole thing to burn properly and fully and not get wasted out in different ways. And those chulas don't cost much. There are companies who, as part of their CSR drives, or even as part of this thing, are helping people to move into that direction. And look at the energy if you take the India's population and look at the number of chulas which are run every day, not only for cooking food but heating water. And if you convert them into efficient chulas, don't you think we are making a move towards going greener? The same fuel is now getting used for more energy output. And there are so many examples like this. In our own home, so many of us take out the packet of milk from the fridge, put it in the patila and put it on the gas. All it requires is to take out that packet 2 hours before we want to heat it, let it come to the room temperature and then heat it. So It's not that only corporates have to think about it, the governments have to think about it. We ourselves in our daily life have to think about it. And there are so many small things each one of us can do. We enter a room, we switch on the AC. Tell me what the temperature we set? 20 degrees, 22, 24. I haven't seen anybody setting more than 24. In our home, we don't set a AC temperature less than 27 degrees. Now you say, how does an AC cool at 27 degrees? It cools. You switch on the fan along with it. You switch on a ceiling fan at half the speed and so you put an AC at 27 degrees. The wind chill factor that you get gives you the same feel as if the room is at 24 degrees. We don't do it. Many of us don't know that it's possible to be done and they don't do it. But I'm just trying to tell you small things. You stand at a signal, you don't switch off your car and you know that counter is working, it's 180 seconds. 3 minutes is a long time. You can always switch off your car and switch it on again. But many of us don't do. So चालू रखते हैं, AC on रखते हैं. As if we were born with an AC. You people are born in a generation where you've seen AC from your childhood. We are born of that generation when even fans were probably a luxury at many places. So it's a matter of time to think about it, is what I would say. I hope I am able to answer your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I think we could take, we'll send you the questions afterwards.
Yeah.
With the positive time, we could continue with the leadership.
Thank you. So I think, so our interaction doesn't stop here. Send me the questions and it's my promise that I'll come back to you with some answer. And if somebody wants to talk to me, my number is there. The team will be sharing my number and feel free to interact with me and it will be my pleasure to talk. Thank you.